What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Genahan. We're coming at you after I attended Friday's practice for the Washington Commanders training camp. I believe this was probably day 11 or 12 of Washington Commanders training camp. This was the fifth day that fans could attend. And I have some notes on that. We have to break down some roster moves that Washington made as well, along with just my thoughts on how training camp has gone so far, because I haven't really been able to talk about it. I've been in California the last week or so. I got back a couple days ago, and now I'm ready to go for the rest of the season. So um, we've got to talk about some of these roster moves. I know it happened a couple days ago, but we got to talk about some of those moves, and then I'm going to go into my recap for Friday's practice. I'm going to talk about Jayden Daniels a little bit and how he has impressed me along with other people, including his coaches, throughout training camp so far, and then get into the kicker competition a little bit more. So let's just go ahead and get things started off with some of the major roster moves over this last week. Like I said, these roster moves happened a couple days ago, so it'd be on Wednesday. I know you've probably heard about them by now, but I just wanted to quickly go over them. The Washington Commanders signed kicker Riley Patterson, who will be wearing number 15, and wide receiver Byron Pringle, who's going to be wearing number 13. They also cut wide receivers Dax Milne and Demir Byard. So those are the moves. Again, the roster right now can be up to 90 players. The Commanders are at the maximum amount of players right now with those 90. So Patterson and Pringle now on the team. Patterson coming in as a kicker, again, to bring some kicker competition. I'll get more to that later. And then Pringle was an interesting one, in my opinion, because Pringle, of course, was on this team last year on the 53-man roster, made an impact in multiple games last year. But I didn't think that this regime was going to bring him back just because it's a completely new offense, right? It's a completely new coaching staff. You have Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury here now instead of Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy. So it's a completely new staff. I just didn't know how they fit and how he fit within their scheme and what they wanted to do, because the main reason why he was here last year and he was signed about the same time now. Maybe it was a little bit earlier. I have to look back at it, but it was about the same time as this year when he signed with Washington originally, was because of that Eric Bieniemy kind of connection. It was because of the Eric Bieniemy connection and with the Chiefs and all of that. So that was a major reason why he was here last season. Did end up being probably our fourth or fifth best wide receiver on the roster. Maybe sometimes I think he was wide receiver 3, which was pretty crazy. So that was Byron Pringle. He's back on the roster. He's going to be wearing number 13. Of course, that's going to change if he makes the final roster. I'd have to expect at this point, he probably does. He's probably the fifth best wide receiver. Comes in at the fifth best wide receiver, potentially even fourth best wide receiver on this team. You've got, of course, you've got Terry at number 1, Jahan 2, Luke McCaffrey 3, and then after that, Olamide Zacchaeus. He's going to be on this roster, I'm pretty sure. And then Byron Pringle will probably be the fifth or the sixth. He's going to be in here for his returning ability, because right now Washington doesn't really have a receiver that can return kicks, especially in terms of one that has a good chance at making the roster. Because you look at guys like Kaz Allen, he hasn't really shown yet, especially even this year. Last year, I know it was pretty entertaining watching him coming out of UCLA. He was kind of a running back, wide receiver hybrid type guy. And he hasn't really turned out to be a great and consistent wide receiver, but he is known for his kick return ability, punt return ability, and that just couldn't outweigh his weaknesses in the receiving game last season. And as of right now, I don't think he has a good chance of making the roster. So Byron Pringle comes in. He's a veteran guy, of course. I think he's in his late 20s, I want to say. So I like this move. I think it's a solid move. Dax Milne, it's truly the end of an era here. Dax Milne was on this roster for way too long. He was kind of a carryover from this Ron Rivera staff. So he's now gone, and then Bird is gone too as well. So those were the moves that Washington made. We'll see if any more moves come into effect tomorrow, Saturday, because again, I'm pretty sure tomorrow's an off day before they go back to practice on Sunday. The Jets, you kind of look at going ahead, going forward. I believe they've off day tomorrow on Saturday. I want to say they have an off day on Monday as well. I'm not entirely sure on that one. But then practice Tuesday, practice Wednesday, I want to say. Maybe not on Wednesday because then they go on they have to travel up to New York to have their joint practice with the Jets on Thursday. So next Thursday is going to be a big one in terms of having this roster set, ready to go for the preseason game on Saturday next week. So those were the roster moves. I wouldn't expect any moves to be made tomorrow, but I wouldn't also be surprised if another move or two were to be coming tomorrow or on any other off days. So that was the new roster moves. Moving on now to today's practice. That's probably a majority reason why some of you guys are here. Friday's practice was it was pretty light, I would say. It wasn't too heavy on the guys. It was very hot, very humid. The weather said it was like in the low 80s. It felt like the 90s. I don't know if it was just because I was in California for a week before this, but it was hot. It was hot. It was humid out there, and so I mean, look at these days. That's kind of every practice now for these guys. But yeah, so we started with the bag drill, of course, and team stretching. Then you go into a kind of punts. They were doing well after you do some like individual position drills. They went into punts with Tress Way. Returning punts were Emmanuel Forbes, Jahan Dotson was back there, Jamison Crowder, Kaz Allen was back there. I think there was one other person. I know those four at least were four of them that were back there. And then they went to like one rep each of 11 on 11 for the for each kind of team. So first team, okay, so it was like first team did like 2-3 reps, then second team did 2-3 reps, and third team did 2-3 reps. So I I don't it wasn't really a lot there. And then they go back to more punts and kicks. I'll get more into the kicks in a little bit, but you had Riley Patterson and Ramiz Ahmed going at it for the kicks in the kick competition. Then you had one-on-one, 1v1s, especially with the offensive line, defensive line, and then also with the wide receivers and DBs. Those are very interesting. I'll get into those in 1 second. And then cap things off with some end of game scenarios, 11 on 11. It wasn't more like 2-minute drill. It was kind of chew clock end of game scenarios. So it was just a lot of running, really. So it was a lot of running. Practice lasted probably about an hour, 20 minutes or so, hour and a half. So it was not like a crazy hard practice for like in terms of like looking at Jayden Daniels and the passing game, but they did a lot of special teams work, kind of focused on that. Dan Quinn had his press conference before practice this time because he had the stuff with the Up and Adams show after practice. So he kind of gave the rundown of what practice was going to look like ahead of time, focusing on the run game, focusing on special teams. That was kind of the main focus on Friday. So some other notes from practice on Friday. Derek Forrest he did not practice. He was out there on the sideline. I saw him, but he has a hamstring injury. Dan Quinn said that he's kind of been limited the entire week. Of course, he was not at practice as well on Tuesday. So he said that it's a kind of a minor injury, though, very minor injury, and that the earliest he can get back is Monday, where he should be limited. So he probably won't be practicing on Sunday, which is notable. Andrew Wiley is still limited with kind of general tightness. They've been very broad with Andrew Wiley's situation. They've kind of just said it's been tightness everywhere, which is interesting. And I mean, with Andrew Wiley and that offensive line, yeah, Wiley needs to get back out there onto the field. He needs to show why he deserves a starting spot because right now that both left tackle and the right tackle positions, right now I'd probably say the right tackle position, I'm less certain on who's going to be the week 1 starter there compared to the left tackle position, which is kind of crazy thing to say. Looking back 3-4 weeks ago when before like training camp started. So I'm more certain on who the starting left tackle will be than the starting right tackle, which is pretty crazy. So those are kind of some notable things. Cornelius Lucas was back. He was not at practice on Thursday for personal reasons. He was back, and then he was on the second team offensive line throughout the day. Some standouts to me. I mentioned him in I mentioned him in I believe last week's pod on Monday, I want to say. If I didn't mention him on Monday, then I think I mentioned him on my Twitter or something. But Tyler Owens, the undrafted safety, I believe out of Texas Tech, one of the, if not the most like athletic player in the 2024 NFL draft class. He had an interception today. It was a pass that was bounced off of Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint. The pass was not thrown by Jayden Daniels, so don't worry about there. I don't remember who it was thrown by. I think it was either Sam Hartman or Marcus Mariota, but I definitely know it was not Jayden Daniels because I would have known if it was Jayden Daniels. So it was yeah, great heads up play by Tyler Owens. I really like Owens' games. He's been a guy that I think could potentially steal a roster spot once we get to the final cuts at the end of this month. But I like Owens' games a lot. I don't really know who he would steal the roster spot from just because there's so many players in that safety room that I think could uh, make this roster and are like kind of locks to make this roster. So there's not a lot of space in the secondary. I mentioned it in last week's, I say last week's, but like last Monday's pod. So you can go back and listen to that if you want to hear my full 53-man roster prediction before training camp began. But yeah, so Tyler Owens, that'd be a really cool guy. I like to see on the practice squad, potentially even make this roster. If he was on the practice squad, I would not be surprised if another team were to pick him up. So Tyler Owens stood out to me. Brennan Coleman, he's been working with the first team all week pretty much, and he continues to work with the first team today at left tackle. He had some great reps in the one-on-one reps. I'll have to look back at those again because I was kind of focusing on the wide receivers and DBs during the one-on-one reps. But from what I heard, he had a great session at one-on-ones again. Again, those are meant to be beneficial and like have the edge for those pass rushers and those edge rushers. Like those guys are supposed to win those reps. So when an offensive tackle or an offensive lineman wins a rep over a defensive lineman, it's a lot more impressive than the defensive lineman winning the rep over the offensive lineman. And the same thing can be said for the wide receivers. Wide receivers against the DBs. It's a lot more impressive when the defensive backs get a stop on the wide receivers compared to the wide receivers getting a stop, a catch, or catching a pass or beating one of the DBs deep. So that's my thoughts on that. I would say for Coleman, I mentioned it before. I'm more confident in who's going to be the left tackle at week 1 than the right tackle, and Brennan Coleman is my guy for that left tackle position. The 3rd round pick out of TCU. He's come out and he's been one of the most impressive players, in my opinion, so far throughout camp. He's really showed that it's his job to lose, basically. It's his job to lose. That's what he's shown because he's gone out there, he's dominated, he's learned a lot, and you can really see his growth throughout training camp so far. Now, I don't want to go ahead and make claims that, oh, we found our left tackle of the future. I know I tweeted that. That was more of a joke. But yeah, so it was he had a good practice again today. Looked really good on the left side. And then Terry McLaurin also had a pretty good day today as well. But again, it's Terry McLaurin. He's going to have a good practice pretty much every day. So those are my standouts. Now, there are a few people that struggled throughout practice today. Marcus Mariota, and another not so great practice. I wasn't tracking his completions and incompletions like I did for Jayden Daniels, and I'll get to Daniels in a second. But it just wasn't a great practice for him. There was a lot of inaccurate throws. Potentially, he even threw that one interception to Tyler Owens. It was either him or Hartman. I can't remember which, but it was not a great practice for Marcus Mariota. Another guy that did not have a great practice was Emmanuel Forbes. He really struggled during the one-on-one reps. Now, I know I said that the wide receivers have the edge on the DBs in these one-on-one reps, but the way he was losing them was pretty embarrassing. He went 0 for 3, which is not great. First rep was kind of like a short curl. He was going up against Terry McLaurin. It was like a 5-yard curl route, and I guess he just slipped or just didn't have good grip on the grass or on the turf. So, yeah. Forbes hit the deck on that rep. Second rep, he got completely turned around and his ankle's broken by Mitchell Tinsley. Tinsley was on, I believe it was like a 10-yard out, I want to say, or a 10-yard post maybe. But yeah, second rep, not great. And then the third rep, he got beat by Terry. Terry. Now this is kind of what I mean by the wide receivers kind of have more of an advantage over the DBs because Terry just had inside leverage over Forbes, and the route wasn't in route, so like or a dig route, so it was kind of just meant for Terry to win that one. Forbes was definitely pretty physical. Sorry, he was definitely pretty physical on that one as well. So like that one, I'm not really going to give him like any crap about. That's it's more just the first two that were pretty embarrassing from Forbes' standpoint, but that third one was kind of just you going up against a very good receiver. The receiver has inside leverage, and the receiver is running an inside route. So like you're any cornerback really is going to lose that. Forbes did a Forbes did a good job though of bringing him down. So those are kind of the standouts and the guys that kind of struggled today. Moving on now to the main guy, the QB1 himself. First time for me seeing Jayden Daniels in person, and I just gotta say, very, very impressive. It was very, very impressive. Now his performance on the field might not be impressive, but just his poise, his way he kind of just like walks around, like I don't know how to explain it, but it's definitely different than what we've seen in past years with guys like Carson Wentz, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like there's just a calmness to him. I feel like that even though you have the entire crowd chanting your name when you run down that hill from the facility to the field, you have kind of just like everyone, that all the eyes are on you. Uh, that like you see the Jayden Daniels jerseys and stuff in the stands, like you just very poised today, and it kind of translated into his game on the field as well because his pocket presence was very good. And now I gave him a lot of slack on it pre-draft with how in game. Now again, this is training camp, right? This is not an actual game. This is training camp. This is practices where the defensive ends and the defensive tackles cannot bring you down if you're the quarterback. Like the quarterback really cannot get touched. So this is completely different than an actual in-game scenario. But something that Daniels really struggled with in college was his pocket presence at times, and his ability to kind of avoid sacks was something that really was one of his weaknesses at LSU. And so that's going to be something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on once we get into the preseason and into the regular season, because like you looked at a guy like Sam Howell, who took a lot of sacks last year. He kind of held on to the ball for too long. Jayden Daniels, he's getting the ball out quick. And I know a lot of people have said that already, but it's true. He's getting the ball out quick. He's making quick decisions. He's very decisive. The ball, again, his release is super quick the ball is quick out of his hand. He's decisive, and even when like he takes that extra half second to go to the fourth or fifth read in his progression, he's still managing the pocket very well. He's rolling out to his right or to his left if he really needs to. It just looks really good. It just looks really good from Jayden Daniels. So I was very impressed with him today. Now, again, he didn't really have a lot on his plate. I mentioned that earlier because they were running the ball a lot and they had a lot of special team stuff to do today. So he didn't really have a lot on his plate. He finished it 5 of 8 with no touchdowns and no interceptions. And I'm going to pull up here. I have the entire pass by pass breakdown for Jayden Daniels. I posted it on my Twitter. If you want to follow me, it's at Mason_Kenahan. So here's the complete pass by pass breakdown for Jayden Daniels today. Complete short right to Brian Robinson. It was kind of like a flat route to Robinson. So just a pretty easy kind of rhythm throw. And then he takes a deep shot on the next one. It was incomplete. He overthrew it to De'Ami Brown. So that was an overthrow there. And then he kind of ran this like read option. I forgot who the running back was. It might have been Eckler, it might have been Robinson. Doesn't really matter. But he kind of ran this read option on the third play. And then he kept it, and he probably was going to get like 3 or 4 yards up the middle before being tackled. Again, you can't really tackle in training camp right now. So there's you can't really you don't want to hurt your quarterback, so they're not really touching him. It's kind of hard to tell. And then the next one, it was a screen to the right side to Jahan Dotson. That was complete. So kind of just a short rhythm throw again. And then complete middle of the field to Ertz. So it was about 15 yards. One of it, probably his best throw of the day, in my opinion, was the one to Ertz. It was kind of threading the needle between the two linebackers. Ertz was crossing from right to left, and he hit him just on the left side of the halfway point of the field. So great timing throw from Jayden Daniels. Ertz could turn it upfield and get a couple extra yards, more than a couple extra yards. You could probably get like 5 extra yards there. Great play. It would have been for a first down. And when I say like Ertz for 15 yards, I meant like he threw it in the air for 15 yards and then Ertz did whatever, because there's not really, it's kind of hard to tell after the catch when they're going to be tackled, just because they don't really tackle. So that was that one. And then another completion to Terry McLaurin. This was a wonderful catch by Terry McLaurin. It was kind of like a short out route, a 5-yard out route, I want to say, for Terry on the left side. Jayden Daniels, right? He takes a snap out of shotgun and then he delivers it to Terry. And it was kind of a little bit wide, a little bit too far to the sideline for Terry. But Terry goes ahead and he kind of bobbles it a little bit, tips it back to himself, and is able to make the catch with one hand and get his feet in bounds as well. So it was a great catch by Terry. Definitely the catch of the day, in my opinion. The next one, short right to Olamide Zaccheaus. So Zaccheaus as well getting some action. And then, so that was 4 completions in a row, really. That's 4 completions in a row. I believe it was 4. He was 4 of 5 in like one of the sessions, in one of the kind of like 11 on 11 sessions for him. So the next 2 passes, incomplete, deep left to Mitchell Tinsley. It was kind of like a shot. Tinsley was running down the sideline, and I believe it was slightly out of bounds, which was the reason, and slightly overthrown, which is the reason why Tinsley couldn't get it. And then the last one was I forgot who he was throwing to, but he threw it over the middle of the field, and it was broken up by someone. I forgot who that was as well. But yeah, so Jayden Daniels finished the day 5 of 8. He had a few good throws. No really crazy bad decisions, but like I mentioned, it was a very safe day for Jayden Daniels. He didn't really have to do that much. Hopefully we'll see more for him on Sunday or on Tuesday, the other 2 practices that fans can attend. But I mean, that's kind of what we saw out of Jayden today. I know Jayden has had a couple of very good practices in a row now. It was Tuesday. He probably had his best practice of training camp. And then Thursday, he had a great practice as well. So now we go into the weekend and go into next week, Jets week, by the way. It's game week next week, where I really think this Jets joint practice next Thursday is going to give us, it's going to be a very telling factor on where Jayden Daniels is at in his kind of progression throughout training camp so far. Because I mean, is his success recently more so that he kind of can get a feel for the Washington defense and the Washington linebackers and Washington defensive backs, just because he's been playing them every day for the last 2 weeks? Is that more the reason why for success, or is he actually like developing and making a lot more smarter decisions, which I think the second reason why there is the case, but we'll really have to see against the Jets next week, because that's what we saw with Sam Howell last summer, was that he was struggling at first, and then he kind of picked up. Then he made some really good throws against the defense kind of the later on as training camp went on, but then he really struggled in that Baltimore joint practices, which that was kind of the main telling reason why how not so great this team was going to be last year, was those Baltimore joint practices, because the team looked somewhat okay during the practices against themselves, and the offensive line looked somewhat okay in the practices against themselves. But when you get to joint practices and you're actually playing against other teams and other opponents, that's really a big tell on where you kind of stand within the ladder of the NFL and the tiers of the NFL. So I think that joint practice on Thursday against the Jets is going to be massive. And then, of course, I expect Jayden to play preseason week 1. We'll see how long, but I don't see a reason why he wouldn't play next Saturday against the New York Jets. So though that's my stuff on Jayden Daniels. Moving on, lastly, here to the kicker competition. Ramiz Ahmed, the former UFL kicker, against Riley Patterson. Patterson, of course, we signed on Wednesday. He's been our first real competition for Ramiz Ahmed, who was brought in, I believe, during OTAs or maybe right before that, uh, right after the UFL season because of the Brandon McManus stuff. So Ahmed, today he was 4 or 5, missed a 49-yarder. Riley Patterson, the exact same thing. So Ahmed went first. He did all 5 of his kicks. He missed the 49-yarder. He knocked down, I believe the last one was like a 54-yarder. He knocked down that one. And then Riley Patterson missed the 49-yarder and knocked down a 54-yarder as well. And then during one of the 11 on 11 and end of game scenario drills, both of them made a 50+ yarder, I believe, to take the lead technically in like their end of game scenario stuff. But both of them made it from 50+ yards. I don't remember the exact yardage, but I think it was like somewhere in the 53, 54, so somewhere in that range. So it was kind of a solid day for both of them. Again, you'd like to see both of them make 5 of 5 when they go into those kicking stuff, which they both did on Thursday. So no real leader in the clubhouse technically when you look at results for these kickers. But I'll just say Riley Patterson's kick looks so much better than Ramiz Ahmed. Ahmed's kick, if you've listened to other podcasts from reporters, you've probably heard this, but it truly is like a kind of line drive, low angle kick that really looks like it can be blocked pretty easily. Riley Patterson's, on the other hand, high arcing. I know Patterson isn't really known for having a lot of power in his leg. He made, again, 250+ yarders today. So we'll have to see about that. But if I had to give it to someone, I'd give it to Patterson right now. So Riley Patterson, in my opinion, would be the leader in the kicking competition. But again, technically, results wise, neither one has broken away from the other. So that's kind of the status on the kicker competition. And that will pretty much wrap things up for this episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. This episode is going to come out, and then I'll have another episode out not next Sunday, like this Sunday, like 2 days from now, Sunday, after practice, as well, as I'll be attending that practice again. I'm posting like every Jayden Daniels throw, not like the video because they're actually like strict on it this time, but like breakdowns of every single Jayden Daniels throw and all of his results, his incompletions, his completions, how many touchdowns he has, how many interceptions he has, for the practices that fans can attend. So Sundays and Tuesday as well. So I'll be posting his stats on my Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it at Mason_Kenahan. So that'll do it for this week's episode or today's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. See you guys in the next one. Peace.